Hey, what's going on, gang? Nate on the Stone here. Welcome back to my channel. You might have missed it, but a few weeks back on one of our weekend videos, I talked about the French film Cuties, which was about to have its American debut via Netflix. Conservatives were raising the alarm about this movie because from the American trailer and from the way that Netflix described the movie, it sounded like a pedophile's wet dream come true. An 11-year-old Nigerian immigrant finds her liberation from her traditional religious family, which I'm just going to say right here is Muslim, FYI, by twerking with her friends. So in a nutshell, the movie is about an 11-year-old girl empowering herself by sexualizing herself. I'm on record saying in that video that the real villain of this whole story could end up being Netflix and not director Maymuneh Decoré. After all, Decoré is on record saying that the whole reason why she made the movie was to warn people about little girls sexualizing themselves, showing the horrible consequences that follow when that road is taken. Interestingly, in an interview with Center Europe, she actually said she was inspired to make the film after seeing the Instagram accounts of several preteen girls who actually had chosen that road. And in that interview, she said, quote, "I saw that some very young girls were followed by 400,000 people on social media, and I tried to understand why. There were no particular reasons besides the fact that they had posted sexy or at least revealing pictures. That is what had brought them this fame. Today, the sexier and the more objectified a woman is, the more value she has in the eyes of social media. And when you're 11, you don't really understand all these mechanisms, but you tend to mimic, to do the same thing as others in order to get a similar result. I think it is urgent that we talk about it, that a debate be had on the subject." Now the movie has finally been released on Netflix, and I was wrong. Because it is totally a pedophile's wet dream come true. Confession time, gang. I myself have not personally seen Cuties because I canceled my Netflix account before it was cool to do so, for the very same reason why my parents canceled cable back in the 90s. The lack of good content in a sea of choices just made the monthly subscription unjustifiable. But several people whom I follow and whose opinions I respect have seen the movie, and from what they said, this is not a morality tale at all. John Nolt, editor-at-large for Breitbart, said this in his review, quote, "Cuties is soft-core child pornography disguised as art. Nothing less, nothing more. Cuties does not tell Naked Floyd to be ashamed of himself. Naked Floyd's going to love Cuties. That's a problem. A big problem. Cuties does not tell 11-year-old girls that twerking and sexualization sets you on a path of self-debasement, that it destroys your self-respect and the respect others might have for you, especially in the age of the internet. That's a bigger problem. For our protagonist, 11-year-old Amy, twerking is the path to enlightenment and personal growth. The movie's director, Maymuneh Decoré, says the film is a critique of the sexualization of children, specifically in the internet's role in it. Bullshit. 11-year-old characters in short shorts and bikini bottoms, legs wide, often punctuated with a come-hither look. Not one crotch shot, not two, not five. Lost count after 5. Still can't believe it. Rod Dreher over at the American Conservative reiterated this point, saying that if Decoré is still saying that this movie is a critique of the sexualization of children, then she's pretty much lying to herself. If I could push pause right here for a second, there are one or two points to be made right now. First, the sexualization of 11-year-old girls isn't even the worst part about this movie. Think about this. Cuties being made in the first place and then advertised by Netflix as a pedophile's wet dream come true seems to indicate that in America and in the West, we're actually bored with sex. We've been inundated with it in entertainment, advertisement, porn that's now available to anyone with a smart device 24/7. And fast fact, did you know that some sources say that the average age an American boy is first introduced to porn is 11? That actual sex between a man and a woman is boring. Our pleasure nerves have been stroked so much that the usual run-of-the-mill fantasies won't do the trick anymore. We have to have something more to get off. The second point is even worse because it comes from the reaction to Cuties from the left, which fell head over heels defending it. The New York Magazine tweeted and then deleted a defense of the film, saying that Cuties, which has angered scandal mongers on the right, is the story of a girl's outrage at and defiance of a patriarchal order. The Daily Telegraph, a UK newspaper, described the movie as, quote, a provocative powder keg for an age terrified of child sexuality. The author of that particular review, Tim Robbie, later tweeted himself that he was happy that the movie had, quote-unquote, pissed off the right people. And these takes highlight the real problem with our society. At the end of the day, the real problem isn't that a French director made Cuties. The real problem isn't that an American streaming company brought it into our homes. No, the real problem is that we're having a debate over whether 11-year-olds sexualizing themselves is a good thing or not. This was the point made by Harvard Law professor Adrian Vermeil when he said that the normalization of pedophilia wasn't going to come from Cuties getting streamed on Netflix or by people watching it on that platform, but by the debate over whether or not childhood sexualization and the loss of innocence was a good thing or not. And he's absolutely 100% correct. Healthy societies don't have these kind of debates, and you can draw whatever conclusions you want from that statement.
But wait! There's more!
Because I'm going to be honest here, gang. The left's reaction to Cuties and to pedophilia on both sides of the ocean was completely predictable and expected. I would have been more worried if they hadn't defended this flick. That would have been unexpected and, in some sense, even more worrying. No, what was really discouraging and even more appropriately maddening was the reaction on the right. Chen said that if you defend Cuties, you're enabling pedophilia. Matt Walsh said that if protesting against the sexualization of 11-year-old girls makes one a right-wing reactionary figure, then he'll proudly wear that title. Beck on his radio show described Cuties as, quote, just one step in the left's plan to take over society, and right now they're working overtime to normalize childhood sexuality. Now, admittedly, you might be scratching your head at that, thinking, well, what's the problem here? They all said the right thing. And that itself is the problem. It's not that anyone on the right said the wrong thing, it's that so many people on the right said the right thing. And the problem with that, first of all, is that it is so hypocritical. In many cases, the very same people who are now losing their minds about Cuties were the same people who assured us multiple times that pedophilia was never, ever, 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 ever in a million years going to be normalized. In the first place, too many sane people on the left would finally wake up and revolt if such a move was made. Furthermore, the LGBTQIA2+ whatever XYZ community wouldn't stand for pedophiles being incorporated into the rainbow flag with them. Now that we are actually on the precipice of this normalization, the very same people who just 2 short years ago were telling us that this was never, ever, ever going to happen are now stationing themselves at the forefront of the pushback. To be fair, many of these people have wholeheartedly condemned whatever steps the left took to normalize pedophilia in the past, once they realized that that actually was the path that the left wanted to go on. But this actually just illuminates the biggest problem, which is this. We are in the position that we are today, on the verge of pedophilia being normalized because the conservative estabulary did nothing. The American conservative movement and the Western conservative movement in general stood by and allowed the left to push us to this point, in many respects because the right agrees with the left on many of the left's basic principles. Look, for example, at marriage. With just a few exceptions, the conservative estabulary either was ambivalent about its definition being completely gutted, or actually cheered on the gutting. In 2010, for example, Beck said that gay marriage wasn't a problem for him because it neither picked his pocket nor broke his leg. Now, that's some nice appropriation of Thomas Jefferson, but it shows either intellectual dishonesty or a complete lack of foresight. During the fight for marriage, you had honest-to-goodness real thinkers, people like Robert P. George, Ryan T. Anderson, Patty Manning, Robert Oscar Lopez, Doug Mainwaring, going all danger, 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 Will Robinson, to anyone who would listen, explaining that if gay marriage was legalized and normalized based on the chain of logic that had been presented to us by the left, then polyamory, incest, bestiality, Even pedophilia was going to be up for grabs. They argued and predicted that if the court decided that the 10,000-year-old definition of marriage as the union between a man and a woman was deemed to be the equivalent of the interracial marriage laws of the 19th and 20th centuries, then religious liberty was going to take one hell of a shellacking, something that you didn't even need to be a soothsayer or a precognitive in order to see. That writing on the wall was as plain as the nose on my face. For example, on March 1st of 2014, Ross Douthat of the New York Times penned an op-ed entitled "The Terms of Our Surrender," in which he basically said, hey, the conservative movement, we lost the fight for marriage. It's inevitable that the Supreme Court will actually legalize gay marriage in all 50 states. Therefore, we humbly ask, as the losers of this fight, that you give us the grace to actually keep our beliefs in our churches, in our homes, and in our private businesses. And guess what happened to Douthat? He was practically crucified for even making such an argument. The left made it absolutely clear that there was going to be no mercy for the losers of this cultural dogfight. To give just one example, Mark Joseph Stern, a writer over at Slate, wrote a response to Douthat's original op-ed entitled "Ross Douthat's Canny and Utterly Dishonest Defense of Homophobia," which began like this, quote, "A married lesbian couple bring their children to a restaurant. The host refuses to seat them because, as he explains, interaction with gay people violates his religious beliefs. The mothers speak to the manager, who reminds the host of the restaurant's non-discrimination policy and demands that he seat the family. Who is the victim? The mothers, who must explain to their children why their parents' mere existence is, for some, a despicable sin? The children, who are forced to watch their parents shamed and humiliated in public? None of the above, according to New York Times op-ed columnist Ross Douthat. By his moral calculus, the host would be the true victim, the family the victors, and the hypothetical, which is far from fanciful, demonstrates not the continuing threat of discrimination in America, but rather the marginalization of devout Christians at the hands of bellicose pro-gay forces. But none of this mattered because the vast majority of the left lined up behind Beck. Whether it was other erstwhile commentators like Bill Whittle, political scientists like Charles Murray, or new blood commentators like Chen, who in 2017 and 2018 said that she had absolutely no problem with the new definition of marriage. Or look at pornography. Last December, a tiny civil war raged on the right after it was revealed that 4 Republican lawmakers had written a letter to the Justice Department in which they asked Attorney General William Barr to begin enforcing the federal laws against obscenity again in order to crack down on hardcore pornography, especially since the Obama administration had decided to kind of ignore those laws. You would have thought that the Justice Department had been asked to make church attendance every Sunday mandatory by the way some people on the right reacted. This was an assault on the First Amendment, outlaw hardcore porn, even that which involved children, and you were on the slippery slope to becoming the USSR. Never mind that porn actually is a national health crisis, which rewires your brain when you watch it enough, and never mind that federalism could actually have been invoked, and the states, remember those entities? The states could have actually carried most of the weight in this new fight. And it's the same for many issues. When was the last time you heard a conservative, a prominent one, okay, make the case that maybe we should look into kind of tightening the divorce laws, since we've seen all the harm that liberalizing them has done since the 1970s? Or make the de Tocquevillian argument, as in Alex de Tocqueville against contraception. Trust me, it exists and it's really, really good. I'm guessing it's been a really long time, if ever. And there's a reason for that, gang. First, the right has a very shallow understanding of freedom, something that it inherited from Cold War American conservatism, which emphasized personal freedom from control as a way of differentiating America from the USSR, where you couldn't even step outside of your house and have a smoke without some government man knowing about it the next morning. And while that might have been an effective tool in the 50s and the 60s, it did spawn this idea that people are free moral agents in the sense that they can do anything that they want as long as they don't harm anyone else. Any attempt to curb personal behavior in any aspect of life, including sex, was deemed to be authoritarian and communistic. Which is actually, not coincidentally, the same belief on the left. The left believes, because of the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s, and because of critical gender theory, that the epitome of human freedom rests in sexual liberation. Therefore, to allow any sexual norms to stand, to allow any curbing of behavior in sexual matters, is to actually force people to live in chains. And granted, if you asked pretty much anyone who's anyone in the conservative movement today, point blank, if that's what they believe, I'm willing to bet that their answer would be no. But that doesn't mean that they're not willing to play in the left's sandbox. And they're willing to play in the left's sandbox because of reason number 2, which is that a lot of people on the right are personally enjoying the things that the sexual revolution in particular has brought them. Denise McAllister made this really great point when she said, quote, "Many principled conservatives watch porn on a regular basis, with possible addictions, protect strippers from shaming, and follow cam girls on social media. They do this in the name of freedom. It's the libertarian influence. This causes principled conservatives to align with porn-loving libertarians against social conservatives or real principled conservatives in the media and in politics. It breaks down core alliances based on principles and makes them about who's loving their porn. Of course, these are personal behaviors, but we need to realize how they're disruptive to relationships. And while politics is downstream from culture, culture is downstream from relationships. If you want to change culture, clean up your act." We just had a blistering example of this with Jerry Falwell. As the president of Liberty University, Falwell was supposed to be a buttress, not only of American conservatism, but even more importantly, of evangelical Christianity. And then we found out that he more than likely was the third wheel watching as his wife and the Florida pool boy did the old
Devil's Tango.
The real problem is that American conservatism made its peace with the sexual revolution and really with the left's general understanding and definition of freedom. They said that they would go along with the left so far, and then they would climb on top of the wall of history and shout, "Stop." The conservative estabulary thought, arrogantly if you ask me, that it could control what stayed in and what came out of Pandora's box after the box was opened. What no one actually realized is that once an idea or a train of thought is normalized, introduced into the mainstream society, you have absolutely no control over what direction it goes in, its mutations, and its offspring. At that point, you're just along for the ride. What it all boils down to, gang, is this. For too long, the American conservative movement has talked a nice talk, all while the left has pushed us and the culture further and further and further to its direction. It's time for it, and by that I mean everyone in it, including you and me, to make a vital decision. Do we defend the sexual revolution, or do we actually defend childhood innocence? Because if there's one lesson that the last couple of years, last couple of decades even, should have told us, is that we can't have both. But as usual, what say you? Are we in the predicament that we are today because the conservative movement for the longest time has been about as useful as a $3 bill? Or would we still be talking about cuties today even if a new moral majority had been whipped into being? As always, let me know your thoughts, ideas, and comments in the comment section below. And while you're writing them, I need a drink. Hey gang, thanks for making it to the end of the video. Before you leave, if you could give it a like, share it with your friends on social media, I would be very much obliged. Really helps me and the channel. And if you like videos about culture, politics, religion from a unique POV, then subscribe, ring that bell for notifications so that you will never be out of the loop when I post new videos like this every week that you're not going to want to miss. Thanks for watching, as always, for giving me a little bit of your day. And thanks to everyone out there who has already subscribed and become part of the gang. I appreciate you all, gang. Really, honestly, I do. And until next time, remember to stay safe and stay free by daring to read, think, speak, and write. Take care, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.